Probably for the sake of our NSA caseworker, we should have brought what are those called? Faraday boxes or whatever for our phones. I don't know. I don't think we should be recording in here with our phones, even though it's going to hit the internet in a couple of weeks.
I mean, we're going to publicize all this information anyway, right?
The government is good. I love the American government.
That's 1 out of 3.
I actually did hear a top secret government story recently about a person who was taken captive in Colombia, and just the means by which that person was able to achieve a ransom. Turns out there are ways, but I guess I better not say.
Do you know about...
But the American government was in the right.
The American government was encouraged to be in the right.
And it's interesting how our government encourages so many governments to be in the right, you know? And it's interesting how we persuade them. Do you know about the privatization of a regime change? You know about this? We don't even have to be involved in regime change anymore because we've sent so many people into South America.
Blackwater will just do it.
No, we don't even need Blackwater to do it. We've basically trained half the death squads in South America, so they're all hardcore commandos. They can freelance. This is the Haiti connection, right?
Right on,
They're untangling that not for the next 20 years, I'm sure, but those private contractors, the guys that got framed, and probably the guys that actually did it.
Right.
It's weird how Safe House is, a couple of years ahead of the curve, I feel like. The 2010s are definitely a point where the post 9/11 thrillers kind of take a turn,
Yeah.
Hollywood stops being on the government side a little bit, it feels like.
Right,
As much as Hollywood ever stops being on the DoD side.
The optimism definitely sort of falls out, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. So hello, everybody, and welcome again to the Good Trash Genre Cast. We gather around a table, we discuss the films you'll never discuss in a film space course. This week's film is Safe House, starring Denzel Washington and Ryan Reynolds. And it's going to be a good time. I'm still Dustin.
I'm still Arthur.
I'm still Dalton. And do you know that this movie came out the year we started the show? That's how long we've been doing this. We now cast our eyes backwards.
Oh, wow.
Do a throwback.
At a simpler time when at least 2 of us were drinking a little bit too much.
Yes.
9 years ago.
So, well, and in case you're tuning in the show for the very first time, we do want to warn you, dear listener, we are going to spoil Safe House, but we'll wait. We'll pause. We'll desist from the spoilerage in order for you to keep up so you know what the fate of Ryan and Denzel may or may not be.
Now, Justin, are you saying that this house might be safe for the time being?
This house is going to be safe temporarily, but I don't feel like Patrick Robert. It's like Patrick Robert is what I wanted to say.
The
T-1000.
The T-1000 may or may not make it very long. But this is how it's going to look. We're going to have a synopsis, which will be spoiler-free. We'll have a quick thumbs up, thumbs down reviews, which will be like a regular review, which would be as light as possible in the spoiler territory. We'll play a little mental exercise called Expanding the Syllabus, which might involve spoilers of the film, but more likely spoilers of films surrounding its orbit. And then finally, all bets will be off. We'll be down to business, doing analysis, and that's when we will spoil the stew out of this film. So, there you go. You've been warned. Arthur, do you have that synopsis for us?
Dun 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 dun.
Plot twist, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I mean, look, every movie should use that piece of scoring. It is pretty solid.
Matt Weston. He's a junior CIA operative in Cape Town, South Africa. South
Africa.
South Africa. Where he runs housekeeping for a CIA safe house. When known traitor and expat Tobin Frost turns up in his care, he knows it's his big break. But the CIA aren't the only ones after Frost. And Weston will have to reevaluate his contacts and his position in order to protect Frost and himself.
Or are they?
Truly a juxtaposition of movie names there. You have Tobin Frost, an absolutely spectacular character name, and Matt Weston, an absolutely milquetoast.
Yeah, very Marvel 60s comic book character name.
Matt Weston.
I think is
the housekeeper.
Probably fitting for Reynolds' performance in this movie. No disrespect, but boy, does he not have much to do.
Yeah, this is pre-Deadpool where he's really kind of still finding that footing, I think.
Arthur, I'm so glad you said this, because of course I want to talk about where this lands in his career, right? This is post his big breakout in the mid-aughts, pre him becoming sort of a household personality, right? Mm-hmm. It is a weird pocket for him. And of course, Denzel is, I don't know,
Denzel
fully at, he's at full Denzel-ness, right?
Yeah.
He comes off of Broadway to do this movie because he says, fuck it, I'll do a movie and I'll let you waterboard me to make it.
Yeah.
Do you know about this?
Yeah, I did know that, That there was real waterboarding taking place.
He said, do it. because he's Denzel Washington. He's one of the best.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is the playbook on ascendant star and peaked star, right? Like this is how you do a Hollywood action two-hander. This is the formula.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
kind of excited about that aspect of this movie.
So with that, I guess we might as well move on into reviews.
Sure.
You've already said that it's doing peak stuff. Dalton, do you have anything more to say in terms of your thoughts on Safe House?
Well, yeah, that doesn't mean it's good, right? And that is sort of the unfortunate crux of it. It's got a couple of things going for it that I think we'll talk about. Right, we have Daniel Espinosa's Hollywood debut. The director had a pretty big hit with Snabbacash over in the Scandinavian chunk of the world. I'm sorry, and one day I'll bother to sort them out. I'm frankly too jealous of their living conditions to bother to keep them straight. The action is competent, right? Like, I think some are better than others. I think the sort of first big safe house set piece we've kind of alluded to, I think is pretty spectacular. A set piece that involved like 1,500 squibs, which is just bananas.
A lot.
Yeah. There's a stadium sequence that I think is really spectacular. I think the climax of this film, we won't get too spoilery just yet, I think is really great. That's 3 set pieces out of a bunch. And not the rest don't quite work as well. There's some foot chases that are middling at best. I appreciate the craft though. I did a little behind the scenes digging. These are well planned and well constructed sequences, even if I don't think they all necessarily work. There definitely is a feeling with this film and the behind the scenes myth making that all movies tend to do with their behind the scenes stuff. Really lean into the character work here, and I think that at some level, even if I don't necessarily buy the studio behind the scenes propaganda, I buy into that. The actors going into this movie were like, okay, cool. This is a spy movie, which means we get to do like a lot of nuanced performance stuff. I can see why Denzel wanted to do it. I, of course, can see why Reynolds wanted to do it. He is not necessarily miscast here, but it sure feels like he's poorly directed. We get like brief glimpses at sort of the sardonic shit, the shtick that he's like known for, even prior to this movie, right? Like if you go back to the early aughts, he's already kind of doing the I'm too cheeky to be in this straight-laced action movie shtick. So it's weird that they just want him to give wet behind the ears green, rookie energy, because he is already kind of established. I don't know that. I don't know. I don't know who you would cast instead of him, but he feels a little wrong here, even though he works. I think there's moments where he gets to look forlorn out windows and be horrified at what he's capable of to protect his own life. Like I think he's not bad in it. I just feel like he could be compelling and is not. This is primo peak greatest actor of all time period Denzel stuff, and not just because he agreed to get waterboarded like an absolute madman. I think he's truly in the pocket on this one. It's been 10 years almost since Man on Fire when he makes this movie, so he's kind of already been in grandpa action mode for a while. And he's still good at it in this movie. He absolutely sells the idea that this guy can make you believe anything. Because he's Denzel Washington. He is one of the most, like, when they wrote this movie was getting shopped, it hit the blacklist, and people were like, oh, we got to make this movie. Denzel was the wanted actor for Tobin Frost, and I get it. Like, it's absolutely perfect casting for an absolutely perfectly named secondary protagonist / pseudo antagonist. I don't know. We'll get into things that I don't like about this movie, which are largely ideological. Although I like that the movie, again, as we've alluded to, is apprehensive at best about the national security apparatus. I like that the film, it has good bones. Jumping off from a safe house, spy safe house, is a cool idea for a movie. I mean, just period, flat out, end of day, good idea. I just wish there's so many moments in this movie where I wanted more. Tracy Thompson from Death Proof and Rent, a bunch of other stuff, or Tom, sorry, shows up for like 3 exposition lines of dialogue and really lands her scene. And I was like, oh, is she in more of this? I don't know. I haven't seen this since it was in theaters. No. Vera Farmiga has absolutely nothing to do except for be a scold. Unfortunate. The French actress who they've cast as Reynolds' girlfriend, didn't remember the actor's name, absolutely nothing to do as well. This is a movie that does not give a fuck about women, as most action movies, tend to go that route, unfortunately, unless they want to put Charlize Theron on the poster. Again, it's stuff that's not surprising, but it's stuff that never stops being frustrating when you let yourself get kind of sucked into a movie because you think it's doing interesting things, and then it goes and does the same boring things that almost every Hollywood movie does. I don't know. Even 9 years out from this, it does sort of feel like a movie from a totally different time, right? Mm-hmm. I know it's just been barely not even quite a decade yet, but it is weird how much the business has changed, not only in the intervening decade, and of course the last year and a half has really changed movies. But I don't know, this $85 million action movie just doesn't feel like something that would get made anymore. If it got made, it would be on Netflix, and it would probably have closer to 100. I mean, they'd probably bump it all the way up to 100.
Yeah.
And it would be like The Old Guard, right, where it would be the prestige streaming hit, right, as opposed to the kind of standard baseline streaming tier. I don't know.
This feels like what was the Hemsworth Extraction? Was that and then Spencer Confidential, what they did with Wahlberg? Mm-hmm. It kind of feels like in that vein.
Absolutely, yeah. Sort of their star-fronted. I mean, again, in The Old Guard, they have this tier of movies where it's big established star and director who's pretty got a good done their legwork, but hasn't had something in a while. I wish I could think of every director for those movies that you just listed. But if you could look at those careers, they're all interesting. I wish I could think of the name of the director of The Old Guard is the one that I'm really struggling for.
That's the woman who did Love and Basketball.
Exactly, yeah.
Gina?
She's got a hyphenated last name, I think. It's just absolutely driving me up a wall that's not coming to me right now.
Gina Prince Bythewood.
Prince Bythewood?
Bythewood.
Yeah, so again, like it is sort of, and again, it's with Safe House, we've got Daniel Espinosa coming off a Snap of Cash, and that's sort of the tier of director that you get. Mm-hmm. Obviously Netflix's first big one's Bright. You got David Ayer, who hasn't done a whole lot, and his directing efforts have been mixed successes. So it does just sort of feel like a movie that doesn't get theatrically released, period. In our current ecosystem for movies, and yet it feels run of the mill and different in ways that are, I think, constantly compelling. So that's what I'll leave it at for now. I think, despite its shortcomings, and maybe sometimes because of its shortcomings, it is a compelling film. If you're a big dork about the business. If you're not, it's a middle grade action movie that's decent enough for a Saturday afternoon.
Alrighty, well, thank you very much for that, Mr. Dalton, sir. What do you say, Arthur? What's your review of Safe House?
I want to toss out some fantasy casting here for the Ryan Reynolds, Matt Weston part.
Okay, hit me.
So my first, I'm going back to 2012 movies.
Yeah, so we
got to see what's in the
we got to be in that
peripheral
mindset. What actor? Yeah, okay, yeah. I'm ready.
So here's my first one, and Michael B. Jordan.
Perfect. No notes. What was he doing in 2012?
Chronicle.
Oh yeah, pre-Fruitvale
coming out
too.
Coming out of Friday Night Lights, probably.
Yeah. God,
all right.
He would have been great.
Shia LaBeouf.
Wow. Yeah, there's a universe where he's in this movie. 100%. I'm glad he's not. I'm glad we don't have to talk about Shia LaBeouf today.
But okay. Zac Efron.
Absolutely a universe where he's the second lead in this movie.
All right. Who was my next one? I think this is the last one. Where'd he go? Who was it? Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Absolutely. Okay. See, and I think the thing, Arthur, about all three of the actors...
Because it's the same as Looper.
Yeah. All three of the actors you mentioned, which is a very similar, right? The two-hander, old guy, young guy, established newcomer. And I think that what you just hit on with those three picks is they're all a sight younger than Ryan Reynolds, which is not to say Ryan Reynolds is old, obviously. He's like, what, Dustin's age? I think I think you guys are about the same age.
His birthday in the movie is 82, so that guy's 2 years younger than me. I don't know about who he is, but yeah.
Yeah, so...
He was 76, so he's got 4 years on.
4 years older than me.
There you go. So... And there you have it, right? So he's playing 6 years younger for this movie, and he looks in his mid-30s, not his late 20s.
Yeah.
Right? And, he still looks great, but he just reads on screen as too experienced to be a rookie in some ways. I've seen him be a disheveled law enforcement or intelligence officer before, I've seen Smoking Aces. I've seen him crying blood with, a big burly beard. I just don't buy it. I like those fantasy castings, though. What do you think of the movie overall?
Yeah, I kind of echo your sentiments. It feels pretty pedestrian in a lot of regards. The first thing I really thought about, though, this feels so much like a Tony Scott film. The visual style, the pacing, the story elements. This kind of feels in line with what he's doing in that middle aughts period. Which, to your point, I think shows this movie's about 5 to 10 years too late for what it is. I think it really does kind of fit about 5 years earlier. And I think Denzel also lends itself to that Tony Scott feel. It feels like one of their I mean, if I didn't know any better, I would have been like, oh, this seems like one of the Scott Washington collaborations.
There's not enough weird video washouts.
Yeah. But yeah.
But I say that with respect to Tony Scott, right? Like he's always got that visual flair, and I think that's what's missing from this.
Yeah. But the cinematography itself, I think, has that kind of grittiness to it that Tony Scott brings.
Especially the stadium sequences. That digital at night kind of grain.
Mm-hmm. I like most of the set pieces. I think the arena thing's really cool. I like the opening in the safe house. I also like that opening with Tobin where he's trying to get across town and going to the consulate. I think that's
with the Onion Knight.
Yeah,
that sequence.
I think that's
really,
a good little bit.
Yeah, love it.
But I agree. I think there are too many set pieces, and that really takes away from giving us any sort of narrative or character motivation. We don't really get a lot of who Tobin Frost is, his motivation. We don't really understand a lot about Matt Weston, who he is, what makes him tick.
We get exposition dumps on both of them, and like dialogue, it literally sets up exposition dumps for both of them. I mean, we've got Sam Shepard saying, "I need to know everything there is to know about Matt,"
and then we don't get anything.
And then we get, he's an orphan, and he likes his girlfriend. The end.
Yeah, I mean, it feels. This feels very primal and very basic, and I was thinking this feels like Save the Cat 101 script writing in that regard. It's very what's the lowest common appeal we can go for in that kind of just saving your skin and being betrayed. And so I think, for those reasons, it's a little too long. I like the ensemble they do put together, but like Dalton said, not many of them get a chance. I mean, we've got Brendan Gleeson, Robert Patrick,
yes,
right? Vera Farmiga, and they really just don't. Sam Shepard, and really they don't get to do anything but be kind of mean and say lines angrily. And I think that's kind of a downfall. I think there are a lot of really good pieces here to make a really good spy thriller, and I think it just doesn't come across as well as it could have. But it's a fine movie. I mean, again, echoing Dalton, it feels like a fun, Saturday afternoon kind of napping on the couch. Safe House is on, and I'm not opposed to that.
If this had come out in the '90s, it absolutely would have been in that TNT USA TBS rotation,
definitely
for sure.
Yep.
You're right though. Absolutely stacked supporting cast, but like not only do some of them not get anything.
What's his name?
Ruben Blades?
No, at the other Safe House.
Oh, Joel Kinnaman.
Yeah, Joel Kinnaman.
From Snap and Cash. Yeah, he gets brought over by the director, which I think is fun, and he actually kind of gets something to do. I think. Yeah. As far as like actors who would have loved to be in this movie, I think boom, he's number one on the list because he's just now doing premium cable prestige shows like. Honestly, there's a universe where he plays Matt Weston, and I think he might have been a little bit better. He's got more edge to him than Ryan Reynolds does.
Yeah, I think it works, though.
Joel Kinnaman has, been at a drug deal before, Yeah. Ryan Reynolds has not.
He's pretty boy.
Ryan Reynolds has had somebody bring him cocaine before. He has never been at a handoff.
I can see that.
He's too smooth in the face.
Yep. That's kind of where I land at. I do have another kind of quibble with the plot, but I want to get to that until probably when we get to my syllabus. So that's where I'm at. Where are you at, Dustin? What do you think about Safe House?
I think, first of all, I think Ryan Reynolds is fine. I mean, I get the point that Dalton was making earlier, and I do like the fantasy casting that we talked about. But I do think he isn't doing that later stuff that he does, that meta winking.
He gets
cynical.
one moment of it late in the film.
But that's not really the role either. I mean, he is playing innocent. I think he's playing that innocence well. I mean, I think I believe it.
I'm not saying he's bad. I do want to clarify. I agree with you that he's competent at it. I just think he's wrong for the part, I guess.
That sort of jolly gee whiz gosh kind of performance that
naivety
that he performs with in The Voices.
Okay,
Nines,
another one.
And so for that I buy it.
And Denzel bought it. I mean, he in interviews about the movie, he calls him innocent. He had a lot of fun messing with him apparently, which I think is great.
Well, it sounds like a thing Denzel would do. I'm not sure I would like Denzel. I don't know.
I think I think it's going to depend on what the role is, right?
Yeah.
Like whatever the role is going to impact how he interacts. with you.
with you, probably so, yeah. But and then of course Denzel is super great, because he's Denzel, so he's going to do his Denzel.
He can do it in his sleep.
Yeah, and so that is great, and it all works for me. It is absolutely, as you guys have been saying, paint by numbers filmmaking. With the set pieces and just the way the plot works. I mean, it's a spy thriller. And, I mean, as soon as I saw certain characters, I'm like, okay, this one's either that or that. We'll see which one.
They're either dead in the next 3 scenes.
They're all archetype.
Or they're a bad guy.
Right.
Yeah.
This is how that's going to go. This is how that's going to go. I mean, you sort of are anticipating it. And there's a certain satisfaction in knowing kind of where it's going and seeing that those revelations come.
And seeing the twists, the zigs where you thought it would zag, etc.
And so that whole mental exercise of postulating hypotheses and not knowing quite where it's going to go, but having a pretty good idea is, I think, a satisfying film watching experience. But it's not, in that same sense, groundbreaking. The visual style is fine. I like the action sequences. I really like the foot chase on the roofs. I thought that was a lot of fun, and whatnot.
It's a little muddy. I like it. You can tell they really thought about the layout. It just feels like it could have been lit a bit better.
Right.
But like it doesn't cut. And like there's action scenes where you can tell they were like, ooh, we don't have a lot of money for this one, so there's a lot of cuts. So there a lot of really cool like long takes and like people chasing each other.
I wanted more of a District B13 kind of Denzel parkour scene a little bit there.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah,
I will say I really do, just because of where we're at now in modern, 9 years later, I do like the tactile practicality of these set pieces.
Yeah, for sure.
They Logon. I wrote it down. I'll find it in my notes. The township that they're in is a real township, and they basically built like a second one right next to it so they could break it. But we'll get into how this movie doesn't address the international politics that allow townships like that to exist.
Right, and that's a whole thing itself. And but it's fun seeing Johannesburg again. And so I like
good
that
on
for
film,
the
man.
little bit that Denzel was there, and then it all moves to Cape Town, and I started caring less just because I hadn't been there. But
Have you been to Joburg?
I've been to Joburg a couple times.
Oh, okay,
but nice place. Anyway,
it's pretty country. South Africa looks good on film, man. There's a reason it shows up in movies.
Man, there's
it's
sure.
definitely having a post District 9 moment, right? Like people want to go shoot there for sure.
Right. And so, but that being said, I think everything does work, and it is fun, and it's an enjoyable experience as a watch. Is it something I'm going to come back to? No. Is it something that I'm going to turn off if I find it? No. So I like it, but it didn't blow my hair back. But that's not really a criticism as much as it's fine.
Was this the first time for both of you?
First time for me.
No, I saw it in theaters.
You did too? Okay. Yeah. The first time since theaters for you as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is this theater you speak of?
Well, Dustin, once upon a time, they had these places with free air conditioning. And while you were there, you could meet strangers and watch films with them.
Well, you paid $5 to $10 for that air conditioning.
Sounds like a...
Well, I think of it as coming with the snacks, I guess.
Sounds like a required penicillin injection afterwards, so I'm good. But there you go, dear listener. Those are our thoughts on More Safe, More House. No one is safe, no one is house. I'm just echoing a thing that Dalton told me about last week. So with that, let's go ahead and move into our little thought exercise that we call Expanding the Syllabus. Hey, Dalton, can you tell us what that's all about?
Ah, damn it. He did it. As soon as I set him up for it, he did. Okay. So here on this show...
30 seconds.
Okay. This is a show where we talk about the films you never discussed in a film studies course. This is the segment of the show that posits what if you did talk about it in a film studies course. We do the thing that we said the show doesn't do. We try to wrestle these movies to the ground and make them sound important. And this is the part where we do that. No, that's expanding the syllabus.
I like it.
Very well played. Well, Arthur, do you have a syllabus for us?
I do. I was kind of really struck by the wrong manness of this film. It's not quite that, but it is kind of that.
Sure.
It kind of feels in that same vein. And so I think I want to really dig into that trope and that story structuring. And it's a story trope that naturally lends itself to suspense, thanks much to the kind of outline Hitchcock kind of developed with his early films. And so I think that's where I want to look at this is the wrong man trope, suspense, how those intertwine, how that works together. And that is something I think Safe House kind of drops the ball with here. And this is where I'm going to spoil the big twist here at the end if you didn't see it coming. When we find out that Gleason is the bad guy, that is information that we get off screen that Matt Weston doesn't have. And in a lot of other suspense films and thrillers, that's where a lot of the kind of emotional crux would be in that final act when there's a confrontation. And I feel that's not really here. I feel like that's kind of taken away when he shows up at the house and Weston's already kind of out of the loop because he's been in this bloody knife fight with Joel Kinnaman.
Well, and if you've seen a spy movie before, you've already figured out that Brendan Gleeson's the bad guy.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
And it makes sense that Ryan Reynolds has also pieced this information together.
Well, there was a
off screen.
40% chance that Vera Farmiga really was, right? It was like,
Yeah, sure.
all of her critique and criticism of Weston is like, okay, either that is the red herring,
Yeah.
or it's, and that's the sort of hypothesis I was constructing. Right?
Yeah.
I was like, either this is because she really is, or because they're planning it.
Because, she's a red
Yeah.
herring, and it will be murdering her by the start
Yeah.
of the third act.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of feel like the real only, other than Tobin Frost and Weston, the only other real kind of connection any characters have is Gleeson and Weston. As he's kind of been his go-to in getting him some sort of position, and he's kind of been his mentor.
He's his
within the
rabbi.
CIA.
Yeah.
And so for there not to be any sort of emotional repercussion from that feels like it undercuts the suspense and the relationship that's been established there. So I want to explore that.
It's maybe more interesting if Farmiga is the bad guy,
I think
and she
so.
kills Gleeson.
Yeah. I think her getting out of that SUV is the more interesting choice.
Yeah.
But so I want to go into Hitchcock. I want to talk about his fascination with the wrong man trope and how he kind of built his oeuvre around that in many ways. And I would go back to the 39 Steps when he was still in Britain. Look at that, which kind of lays the blueprint for what he's going to do over the next 40 years or so, 30 years. From there, I would go with The Man Who Knew Too Much, and I might do the American version actually with Stewart and Novak,
Yes.
maybe.
In
Man Who Knew Too Much.
Man Who Knew Much is Stewart and
No, Doris Day. No.
Doris Day.
Yeah.
It is Doris Day.
And then I would go in with North by Northwest, I think, which kind of caps that off as I think the finalized version of the wrong man's story.
I can't believe I brain farted on that because she's got the Que Sera Sera stuff in
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, I want to jump up and I want to talk about Brian De Palma's Mission Impossible, which in many ways feels Hitchcock, but it also is kind of a proto for this, the kind of
A De Palma film felt like Hitchcock? It's shocking.
who'd have thought? But it does have that same kind of government betrayal aspect that Safe House is playing into. So I want to look at that. I might talk about The Losers, maybe looking at the graphic novel versus the movie. I'm not quite sure, but that's another one that's kind of in the same vein.
Chris Evans would have been a pretty okay if he hadn't got roped into the Marvel machine. Speaking of,
Hey, everybody,
he gets to play the hack.
everybody bows a knee to the mouse at some point.
Oh yeah, you simply must swear fealty to the mouse. You have no choice.
Can't wait for Denzel to show up.
Oh, what is
Denzel's got to be a
you
villain,
know
right?
the MCU, like every franchise has to have been chasing him for 10 years. There's no, I'm sure, I can't even tell you how many, there's no telling rather how many meetings he's probably turned down. Yeah.
Yeah. And then finally, I want to go with a movie I just watched, Sneakers, with Robert Redford from 92, which really kind of feels like a natural pairing with this movie and kind of dealing with the questionable motives of our governments. And really plays well within this trope, I think, and really does some fun stuff with that. So that's where I would go with this course.
Very cool, very cool. I like that very much. What do you say, Dalton? What would your syllabus look like using Safe House?
Well, as we all know, as we were taught by W. Kamau Bell and Kevin Avery, Denzel Washington is the greatest actor of all time, period. Not the least of which because if you track Denzel's career from the late 90s to, let's say, Safe House, you see an evolving picture of the United States security apparatus and also public opinion towards said apparatus. So we're going to be doing a class that is going to be, at least in the very front half of it, maybe this class might need to be discussed at more length next week. But at the front half, it's going to be very Denzel heavy, but it's Denzel Washington, the security state, and whistleblowers. So I think just to kind of lay the groundwork to get this class thinking about where we're at, we got to go from pre 9/11 to post 9/11. So we'll be starting with 1998's The Siege, a film that posits what if the United States military had a reason to occupy New York? And what if they were rounding up people of North African and Middle Eastern heritage? I want anyway. We don't need to get into conspiracy theories yet. That also is more relevant for next week's show. But it is interesting that this is a film that comes out in 1998. It is interesting that is what the plot is about. If you haven't seen this film, I haven't since I was a child. You got Bruce Willis as a bad general, Denzel as an FBI guy, Tony Shalhoub's there too. I forget who else in this movie, but it very much is a post-first attack on the World Trade Center, pre-second attack. Very much a Hollywood film trying to reckon with very real political issues while also not understanding anything about politics, really. A film that kind of is beyond dealing with some of the obvious biggie on the eye chart stuff that you should be dealing with if, let's say an FBI agent is a black American and is watching an American city be occupied by the military. I think it might come up. It's a very post-90s film. There's a great episode about it on the podcast. Friendly Fire had a pretty good episode about it. Next, though, we'll be moving to The Manchurian Candidate. It's 2004. We're remaking a 60s paranoid classic. Jonathan Demme reteaming with Denzel post-Philadelphia. A film we've discussed on this show. So we got one film we haven't talked about, but we'll probably get to. And then The Manchurian Candidate. And then, of course, we'll look at Safe House. The Manchurian Candidate is much more of a paranoid thriller than this film. Very much a who knows what and when did they know it kind of thing. But similar to Safe House, it is very much a film where Denzel is, as opposed to being a part of the security apparatus and trying to check it from within the system, both Manchurian Candidate and Safe Houses are films that find him on the outs with the apparatus. Manchurian Candidate's character obviously is, he's much more morally considered a good guy, like capital G, good guy. Whereas, of course, Tobin Frost in Safe House is much more morally complex. But I think all three of these films, when taken, number one, as arc of Denzel's career, which we've talked about at length on this show over the last several years, and looking at how the media deals with the global war on terror, both before it had a name and after it has a name, I think we can kind of start to get in a headspace thinking about how these things shift and evolve, how conversations change. That sort of would be the point where we'll pivot to the real world and having to deal with what does that look like in real life. And I think for the sake of brevity, stay tuned. That's what the class is for now, but maybe next week, and not maybe, I will be discussing this idea a little bit more on next week's episode.
Alrighty, well, thank you very much for that, Mr. Dalton Stewart. I think the class that I would have in mind here would be a class on spy thrillers, a spy action thriller. And there might be a first half of the class. I really just sort of thought about a second half of the post-9/11 world for that class for today's syllabus. But if I were to actually expand this into a 16-week semester kind of course, I think we would go before that for a lot more material there. So just to leave that there. But to begin with, I think in terms of the films, you've already mentioned The Manchurian Candidate. That's definitely a movie that I think we'd want to watch. And also we're doubling up on the Denzel, which is always a good idea.
Yeah.
And then
it's just easier to talk. When there's more controls, right, for the media you're talking about.
Absolutely. So then we've got Safe House that we're discussing today, rather. And then I would move into The Bourne Identity, I think.
Sure.
Which is an interesting action piece of cinema as well as a particular kind of spy thriller. And then I would go with Chris Pine, The Sum of All Fears, for the...
Chris
Ben
Pine.
Affleck?
Ben Affleck's in that one. Chris Pine is the other...
He's Jack Ryan.
Oh, he's Jack Ryan. That's right.
Is that the name of that? No, Shadow Recruit, right? Isn't
Shadow
that what
Recruit.
it's called?
Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit.
Yeah.
Kenneth Branagh is The Sum of All Fears, though, right?
No, that's
That's
Jack
it.
Ryan.
Shadow Recruit.
So maybe I like that one better. I don't know. My mind is not...
I forget who
no
directed Some of All Fears. It's somebody towards the end of their career, but somebody with a
anyway,
name.
one of the more contemporary entries in the Jack Ryan trilogy...
But the post-9/11 ones.
Post-9/11 ones. I would save Harrison Ford, again, for the 90s and something that would go on before 9/11. But for now, I would go there with that. Zero Dark 30 is definitely a movie that we'd have to talk about.
Sure.
And would have to use. And then the television series Homeland would be among the things I would discuss.
And these are both properties that but ask, but what if your torturer is a girl boss? Does that make it okay?
Right. With readings, a couple things I found that are interesting to me. First of all, there's this article called "From the Manchurian Candidate to Zero Dark Thirty: Reading the CIA's History of Torture Through Hollywood Thrillers," which surveys several different thrillers, but obviously Manchurian Candidate on into that. And then finally, Gender, Geopolitics, and Geosurveillance in the Bourne Ultimatum, which also touch on other questions of surveillance throughout. I thought about one of the Snowden movies, The Fifth Estate or Snowden or whatever, and maybe I might use something along those lines.
I will probably talk about Citizen 4 next week.
Yeah, something along those lines, but I haven't made my mind up entirely. But that's sort of the general shape of what the course would look like for me right now if I were to go at it.
It sort of seems like we've found ourselves making similar courses once again.
Yeah.
Was it City Slickers or Exorcist 3 we just had that happen on?
Exorcist 3, as memory serves.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what do you have like looking at that class? Because I think I'm really interested in sort of the whistleblower aspect of all of these movies, right? At the very least, the not being able to trust the people that are supposed to be protecting you.
Right.
What do you feel like is do you have like a big grand thesis for the class?
At this point, I would not.
Gotcha.
It would be
Okay.
simply just, these are films that are exploring that. What are the sort of popular opinions? I think that's one idea to think about. What are some more tourist kind of approaches? Are there any sort of politics that are being advanced by the various sundry films? And what are the ways in which ideological approaches might be able to show the sort of hidden veneer behind? I think I have an ideological reading of the torture scene, for instance, that we'll talk about later in analysis.
Yeah. Okay.
In which certain viewpoints color the way in which those representations are made that reinforce already established hegemonic senses of power. So, but we'll get to that here in a little bit.
Ooh, yeah, I think we should get to it right now.
Okay, well, yeah, I guess it is. It's time to get down to business, isn't it?
It's business. It's business time. I know what you're trying to say. You're trying to say it's time for business. It's business time. Ooh, it's business.
That's right, dear listener, and that business is, as always, analysis. I guess I can start with that since we sort of were talking about it already. Let's talk about, okay, we've already mentioned what a just insane actorly move it is for Denzel Washington to allow himself to be waterboarded for a few seconds.
About, I think 5 seconds was what they decided was the safe max. But yeah,
Right.
Robert Patrick, again, on-set stories that are told for promo reel are always potentially apocryphal. You got to
Right.
take the shit with a grain of salt. But as it's told, Denzel did not discuss this with anybody beforehand. They just were like, okay, and now and he goes, no, we got to get this on camera. The audience needs to believe that Tobin Frost will let himself get waterboarded and not break.
Right.
What an absolutely gonzo, one of the greatest of all time move.
Right.
If you don't know, listener, it is apparently so much worse than you can imagine. It's one of those things that doesn't sound that bad, but by all accounts is just absolutely horrible.
Dry land drowning.
Yeah.
It's just awful. Now, here is the
Boy, did we do it a whole bunch.
Right. And here's the ideological piece to it. Now, first of all, we could put this in the whole conversation with Zero Dark 30 and talk about its effectiveness. Obviously, it is part of the plot point of this film is that it's ineffective against a Denzel Washington. Right. If you waterboard Denzel, you get nothing.
Well,
And-
to your Zero Dark 30 point, they do reference Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, right? Who is
right.
one of the famously a waterboarding
Right.
victim of ours.
and they mentioned Khalid Sheikh Mohammed again in Safe, or is it Sharif? Who do they mention?
It's KSM.
Oh, KSM.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's Robert Patrick name checks like he lasted. He rode the waterboarding bull for X amount of time. How
Right.
much can you do, bud?
But here's the weird ideological piece to it. Now, Denzel Washington is a force of nature, and I know there's a lot of star personality and scripting that goes into this kind of stuff, but there is an ideological bit of reinforcement that's going on that you do this kind of stuff and it breaks weak men. Weak men are terrorists. But if you have a strong man, and it's a strong American man specifically, then you come to realize that, they can resist this. And it begins to reinforce, I think, maybe even in a subconscious kind of way, that maybe this isn't torture after all. It's just those guys just happen to be weak.
Can I tell you what is interesting? This is my totally opposite read of that.
What's that?
And maybe it's just because of I look at Denzel as like a stealthily political actor. I read it as, oh my God, we would do this to Denzel. Holy shit, we are bad guys. Like that's
yeah.
how it reads to me, is like watching Denzel like gag for air is upsetting as a long-term, literally as long as I've been alive, he has been one of the biggest actors in the world. So it is just like a very jarring image in a mid-budget, mid-prestige action movie.
I guess the point.
But I think you make a very good point.
When it kind of sort of spits to the side, at one point, it's like, what else you got? I mean, very cigarette
John
voice.
Wayne-y, yeah.
Clint Eastwood kind of moment there. And again, because these Muslim terrorists are not as strong as our red-blooded American boys and girls, right?
Sure. Okay.
And so I do find the ideological apparatus might be being reinforced there just a little bit.
Well, and
with
it's
them.
interesting that Ryan Reynolds, the housekeeper of the safe house, green case worker that he is, has never heard of waterboarding in 2012 because this movie seems to take place contemporaneously with when it's set.
Is his shock at what they're doing, not that he doesn't know what it is?
Maybe, because of course he asks, is this legal? Well, one, he would know the answer to that.
Right.
Yeah.
That for starters.
And then brought the buckets of water in at that point, but they're turning off the lights to go into interrogate. So
that's true.
So I think he's aware. You guys are about to do something you ain't supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, and I guess maybe it is shocking. Like, I knew we let other people do. I knew we outsourced this kind of thing. I didn't know we had CIA teams that would just show up on a moment's notice and do it.
And I think there's part of the cross-grain reading to it as well, is that Ryan Reynolds is the sort of the cipher for the rest of us. And so he is supposed to be scandalized and horrified by what's going on. And so the idea that we would do this and do this to our own is part of the horror. But the way in which ideology works, it is so insidious that I think it more strongly proclaims the message American boys can handle it, as opposed to Ryan Reynolds' vicarious vehicle, as he's viewing this incident as, I can't believe you guys are doing this, right? And I think the greater strength lies on, Denzel's strength.
Yeah, interesting. I'm surprised for a movie that one of my first thoughts was, wow, Denzel gets first billing and doesn't show up for like 15 minutes. What a power move. Forgetting that he get waterboarded in this movie. So I don't want to throw that out there. But I was
arguably the bigger star, though.
Oh, not he is the bigger star. I just think it is such a badass move to be top billed and not show up for like a while. It's just cool. He has a line in this that I think speaks to what you're talking about. This is after they've gone on the run. Robert Patrick has been thrown into the molten steel. He's done so. And Denzel says to him, our job is to, I wrote it down. Our job is to take advantage of people's desire to believe, which I think is interesting as far as, again, these are the moments where the screenplay does shine, where you look at a screenplay and go, oh, this dude cared to say something. This person was trying to communicate an idea, and that idea is these agencies are only designed to give you an illusion of safety. And from an ideological standpoint, unfortunately, you can't trust anything. And I hate to bring out tinfoil hat and corkboard Dalton today, but it's the kind of movie we're talking about. You can't ever know if the movie Safe House is a psyop or not, and that's very frustrating. For there to just be multiple agencies with totally redacted budgets whose job is to convince you that not only are you safe, you are safe because of them. And not only are you safe because of them, you don't want to know what they do to keep you safe. Well, motherfucker, I do want to know. Sam Shepard says that, right? The American people don't care about truth anymore. Disagree. I think a lot of weirdos who refuse to take a shot will show you that people do have a desire to know the truth. And this obfuscation, this shell game, is the thing that makes it impossible to have a functioning republic.
Right.
Lowercase r, of course.
Well, and I think there's a way in which the sort of duplicitousness goes to every level that the film kind of acknowledges as well. It's we want to make sure that we at least present the best kind of story that doesn't come out before the set is subcommittee. Right,
Yeah.
It's not about what happened. It's about
the official narrative.
We got to account for these events and the ways in which those different accountings and stories that are being told, which is a major plot point in the film, is just sort of accepted as this is the way it is.
The manipulation of belief. And of course, the desire to believe.
Right.
You want to believe that things are going to work out for the best.
Right. And ideology is a thing that you don't believe, but you act like you believe it anyway, right? And that does seem to be part of what the entire intelligence apparatus tends to do, is that we've put together such a narrative of liars telling lying lies all the time that we sort of accept it as a point of fact.
Hypernormalization.
Yeah.
We've talked about this till we're blue in the face for the last several years, but this is the problem that the KGB and the USSR had, right? Nobody could trust anybody at the end. It was such a gigantic state, capital S, lowercase s, not important. It is a big damn governmental institution, both like just the USSR as a whole, and then the secret police that and the intelligence community that is the KGB. You have multiple bureaucracies, and this isn't like, oh, the deep state, but like, well, kind of. The bureaucracies are weird and labyrinthine and nebulous, and at the end of the day, there's a whole bunch of people who nobody knows their name, and nobody really gives a shit what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. They can kind of do whatever they want. So it is just, as you said, it's liars lying to each other about the lies they're going to tell us, and it's just hard to take anything at face value at a certain point. And yet, we accept that there are certain things we're just going to have to take at face value so we can go to sleep at night.
Well, to go back into Zizek for just a second in terms of ideology critique, it's the game we play with Santa Claus. Is that the kid knows Santa Claus isn't real and the parent knows Santa Claus isn't real, but they both pretend that Santa Claus is real because it keeps the facade going. And that does seem to be the general state of relations with the intelligence state.
Well, this do we want to is jumping ahead to like the ending of this movie like too early?
I don't think so.
That? Okay, because I feel like it's relevant, right? Because this movie does the thing that Hollywood loves to do, which is action movie bullshit can save the world, right? Ryan Reynolds pulls a Black Widow at the end of Captain America 2 and dumps all the government secrets out, as if CNN would report on the Pentagon doing something nefarious.
If you anonymously drop that material never makes it to print.
No,
by the way.
as Denzel told him, you get killed. You get two in the back of the dome and unceremoniously dumped to the side of the road, because that's what happens to whistleblowers, and that's not paranoia. That's not conspiracy theory. Like one of the journalists that blew the lid on the Pentagon paper, or the Panama Papers, right? That was called the money thing with the royals, and everybody had all that money offshore in the Caribbean. One of those reporters died in a car bomb, like months, if not weeks, after those reports came out. This shit happens
retribution
all the time.
Yeah,
and you can't ever know which government did it. And they don't want you to know. None of the governments want you to know. They all want to have plausible deniability on their wet work.
Right.
It's slang for when they murder people.
Right.
It's cute how they have little words for everything.
Yeah.
Enhanced interrogation, wet work. It all sounds so sexy when you've got lingo and jargon.
Well, it's euphemistic, right? I mean, that's the other part of how the ideology works. The fact that it is housekeeping, that I've got a house guest. Where's the guest room? All of these other terms that are being used for housing these people.
Sort of reminds you about all the cult speak we talked about back when we were doing that marathon before the hiatus, huh?
Right.
It's weird how states just are.
And so they adopt that language because everyone knows, and that's the thing. There's no one who would be intercepting this information. There's no one who is receiving or giving this information. There's no one at all that would be confused by what's going on here. Everyone knows, okay, if they got a new house guest, they're talking about they've brought somebody in. If there's a guest room, that's the interrogation room, etc. Housekeeping, that's the person who manages this particular location. But it's a game they keep playing with themselves, right? And what it does is it takes the teeth out of the kind of work that's happening. And so that's another different kind of level in which the euphemism itself helps us to sort of not deal with the fact, this person passed away, so they died, right? It's the same kind of idea. It's like there's something a bit more stunning about hearing a tough term an accurate term, as opposed to this sort of euphemistic deferral that happens. So, for sure.
Well, I feel like this sort of posits Ryan Reynolds tries to affect change from within the damn belly of the beast, right? That ends up being like what Denzel's trying to convince him of the whole time is like, you got to get out of here. Like in what is maybe Denzel's definitive death scene, by the way, where he like goes, all right, let's go, and then dies as he's getting
It's great.
What a fucking pro. But you got to be better than me, right? Like, we get this kind of like moment of interior life of Tobin Frost, right? Who's like revealed to the web behind the ears baby that like the moment he knew that things were bad was when he killed Whistleblower. Like that was just the job, and he went back to work the next day like nothing happened. And we don't know like when he finally split, but it was after that. And he says, "You got to be better than me." And Denzel or Ryan Reynolds doesn't know what to do with "You've got to be better than me," so he goes to CNN, which is just again like I appreciate from a you have to end your action movie standpoint, like you want the whistle to get blown, but the movie like straight up states that whistleblowing doesn't really work because the laws we have to protect whistleblowers are made by the same people you're trying to blow the whistle on usually.
Right.
I don't know. Ask Chelsea Manning how whistleblowing works out. Ask what's his doodle?
Snowden?
Yeah.
Who may or may not have been an asset to start with. But anyway.
Well, but who isn't, baby?
Right.
These days, hard to tell. But it's interesting that the movie says, well, but maybe, maybe if the right congressional hearings happen.
Right. Well, the idea is if we get Ryan Reynolds as the new deputy director of the CIA, then it's going to be fine.
But or he just gives the info to the right people, and then he can go back to Paris to stalk his ex-girlfriend, which is what the movie ends on.
Right, strangely enough.
I don't think she would have smiled if her boyfriend she just found out was a CIA agent just showed up at it.
Just watching her.
I don't think that she smiles.
Yeah, that's a little bit strange.
Screenplays written by dudes often don't know how women would react to things. I'm married to one and frequently find myself surprised.
But I do think that whole
Screenwriter?
Yeah. No, yeah, that was very good. Thank you.
deposing of Sam Shepard and perhaps the idea that if you have a good man with all the power, it's going to be fine, does sort of echo some of those same arguments we see in like The Dark Knight.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That we've got to give up some security or some freedom sometimes in order to have that kind of security. If we trust the one good Caesar, then it's fine. But if it's a bad Caesar, if it's a good Batman who's able to monitor all of our cell phones and makes it go away when he's done using it, cool. But it's just the question doesn't become whether or not it's okay to do that cell phone monitoring. The question is, do we have the right people in place?
It's Matthew McConaughey in True Detective, right? The world loves bad men, needs bad men, keep the other bad men from the door, right? Which does make you wonder, is Tobin Frost actually the person to do the right thing in this, right? We know his plan was to sell it at the start of the movie. If Tobin Frost survives the events of Safe House and, let's say, Matt Weston doesn't, does Tobin Frost figure out the right thing to do? Does he just orchestrate a bunch of car bombs? What does Tobin Frost do with this information, right? If he decides to do, quote unquote, the right thing. Because in the arc of Denzel's career, Tobin Frost fits very squarely in it. Denzel characters who are bad guys die, or they go to jail to do penance, right? Flight, he goes to jail. Man on Fire, he tortures a bunch of people. He dies to save the little girl. He dies in you can do this ad nauseum because that's Denzel as the kind of super producer / actor / director that he is. He says what happens to his characters. That's how it works when you're Denzel, when you're at that level. And I always just find that interesting, to try to read between the lines of what does Denzel as an actor, as a producer, think about this character. And it's interesting that to him, Tobin Frost is, number one, the ultimate badass who never quits, refuses to admit that he's dying. But number two is is shady in a way that cannot cover up the goodness that is still in there somewhere, which I find very interesting. Just again, as we're discussing does change within the system do anything? Is it a question of, well, if the right people have the right information? I don't know. There's no answer to this question, of course,
right.
But I find the way that Denzel fits in as kind of the piece they write out of the equation by the the epilogue. It's just interesting to think of, what if they don't write that piece out though? I don't know. I'm not trying to rewrite Safe House over here. I'm just wondering, what do you even do with that? I guess it probably turns into more of a burn after reading ending, right? Where it's just well, I guess we didn't learn anything, and hopefully that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that earlier.
Yeah. I mean, this movie's got a little bit of that, right? If it doesn't have a happy ending.
Yeah.
It's weird how many spy movies are just about a list of names.
Right.
I mean, so many of them.
Knock lists, etc.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess that's their most important MacGuffin.
I mean, it's a pretty good MacGuffin for spy movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's either that
Multiple
or,
people could lose their lives and the entire family's wiped out.
yeah, it's pretty much that or launch codes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or encryption technology.
Right. For sure.
Do we have anything? I guess we could talk about real briefly. It's Longa Township, by the way. these are the conditions that this security apparatus creates, right? We're not just talking about the United States here. We're talking about Russia, the former Soviet Union, South Africa, New
itself,
Zealand, the MI6. All of these countries have slums and big italics, right? You know, people live everywhere. This is not a judgment word. This is just, these are the words we have to talk about places that don't have any support from their own damn governments. Logan Township is not an official township. This is a place built of found material. Rio de Janeiro's got a ton of these places, the favelas. This is what happens when you pour all of your money into just lying to yourself constantly, is you have people who exist on the margins of your society who have no choice but to organize independently of you because they know that there's no trusting you, right? Logan Township is the site of at least one, if not two, civil rights related massacres, carried out by the pre- and post-apartheid governments. I don't know. It sucks, dude.
Yeah.
It sucks that a country can go, okay, fine, we're not doing apartheid anymore. But we swear to God, if you show up with signs, we're going to start shooting stuff at you.
Right.
I don't know. There's no country that doesn't do that.
Right.
I don't know. I guess Cuba's been okay lately. They haven't... I guess they started tear gassing people just recently,
Yeah, I
didn't they?
think maybe
There was a recent thing, wasn't there?
Well, when this drops, the protests will have been going on for like a month or so now.
Or more,
Yeah.
But it was going on for a while before there was, any action against the protests. But again,
Right.
I'm not going to let anybody off the hook. Let's just say no governments let their people be mad in the street.
No.
They just don't let you do it.
Well, it's dangerous. That's why.
It's dangerous to them.
It's dangerous. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. To make sure I'm not making some sort of
But, it is dangerous if you're out
reactionary
there.
sort of position here.
It's
We love the
dangerous-
government.
Yeah. It is dangerous if you're out there. Don't take your phone, take water, etc. Be nice.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
I'm not here to give advice. I'm not qualified to do it about anything except watching movies.
Well, I think with that, we can give some advice as to what we should do with this film, which is to shelf it or to trash it.
I want to shelf that transition.
So I go to you first, Arthur. What do you say to Safe House? Does it belong on the shelf or ought it go to the trash?
I think that this is a very, very light trash. I think we've kind of alluded to the fun that is to be found here, but I don't think this is one you have to seek out and find. Denzel's obviously done much better stuff. Reynolds has done much better stuff, and there are much better spy thrillers out there. So that's where I'm at with it.
Very good, very good. What do you say, Dalton?
Yeah, as much as I like fight scenes that are mostly just people throwing each other into furniture, which, what a great... I like it when people have to fight in a hallway and they're just throwing each other into door frames. It's cool shit. I'm with Arthur. It's a light trash. Again, there's an era, a universe where this is a basic cable mainstay, and it'll probably be a streaming mainstay forever, right? It's a Warner Brothers movie, so HBO will always have it in perpetuity. I don't know.
Actually, I think it's off HBO Max as we speak.
No, wow.
I think we got it before the...
Whoa, did we slide it under the wire?
I
Nearly,
think so.
nearly.
I think it was this one. Wow. It's one of the movies we're doing soon.
Sneaky. Anyway, yeah, that's where it's going to live and breathe for the rest of eternity is probably streaming services, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Dalton. I'm also going to lightly trash the movie. I think it is fine. I think it's good, and I would definitely not watch it, or whatever I'm trying to say there with the double negatives. If it were to come on, I would definitely sit through it, because I do find the performances attractive and enjoyable, and I find the narrative to be itself just entertaining. But no, I don't see any need to own it. So that's what it comes down to. Is like, would I spend extra money to buy? No. So that's where it lands. So with that, you can be part of the conversation with us all via the magical means that we all know as social media. Arthur, how do we do that? How do we have that conversation?
Yeah, if you want to let us know if we were completely wrong about Safe House or misjudged this what you consider masterpiece, maybe you can let us know online. You can do that on Twitter at Good Trash Media. You can tweet at us over there. Dalton loves it if you add him.
I do.
He just loves those conversations. So hit him up. You can email us long-form content at goodtrashgenrecast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook. We're not very active over there. We're much more on Twitter, where we're retweeting our observations on movies, articles we find interesting, memes we find funny. We also retweet friends of the show, including The Wheel of Randy.
The Wheel of Randy, hosted by one Dan Wade.
There
yeah.
it is. And also The Praise Down. Those sweet boys over there are always fun to listen to. And so, yeah, check us out there and give us a follow.
Thank you so much
And
for
if
that.
if you're in our NSA caseworker, we don't call the cops, so bring the black bags if you're going to show up.
Yes. All right. So with that,
Sorry, I just wanted to get that in there. I love tickling you under that particular armpit.
I was like, okay. Are we gonna do another movie? We're gonna keep doing the show.
Yeah. So, you ready to know?
I suppose. Yeah.
I mean, you already know.
Can
but
I know?
Arthur accidentally programmed a double feature, it turns out.
I doxed. I doxed next week's show already to the hosts. But 10 years before The Sum of All Fears, Phil Alden Robinson would do another spy thriller. We're putting on our expensive shoes and testing our security as we take a look at Sneakers.
Sneakers. They couldn't call it Phone Freakers, and Hackers was already taken.
So there you go, dear listener. We're going to watch Sneakers, little Robert Redford, River Phoenix, and others for you all. You keep watching, we'll keep talking, and we'll see you all next time.
I'm not fake. I'm not fake.